Hello and welcome to the program. I'm State Representative Steve Mentzar of the 97th Districts in Lancaster County. On today's program, I'm pleased to welcome Lancaster County's Director of Assessments, John Mavrides. Mr. Mavrides, welcome to the program.
Steve, thanks for having me.
John, you and I go back a long time. As a matter of fact, we grew up in the same community, Manheim Township, actually very close neighborhoods. And I went to school with your sister. So it's a pleasure to have you here, and we're going to talk a little bit about the reassessment program that's coming up in the next year. And I'm wondering, John, why is reassessment necessary in Lancaster County?
That's a good question, Steve. There's a lot of reasons why we do reassessments. The courts have determined that reassessment should be done periodically, because if they don't, there's a question of constitutionality as far as how assessments are being unequal, so that it should be done every so often. The other reason we do it is the county has an ordinance to do every 8 years to do a reassessment. Our last one was 2005. The next one would have been 13, but there was some delays in there, so the next one will take effect for 2018.
Great. And these assessments, they're done for fairness, correct?
Correct.
In other words, we want to make sure that everybody is paying on property a fair amount of tax. Is this done to increase revenue at all, or not?
No, the goal of reassessment is to be able to look at properties and get ones that are too high in line with what they should be with current value. Alternately, ones that are too low, to get those where they should be, so that everyone has a fair assessment. Then that tax base is spread fair and evenly.
So, John, it's about fairness. It's not about raising more tax revenue.
No, it's actually in the statutes that they talk about the anti-windfall quote that's in there that talks about, it used to be one step where you could just take your taxes levied, divide by the new assessments, and as long as you did not increase that by more than 10%, then it was okay. It was kind of one system where you couldn't really see everything. So through the years, that process has become a little more transparent, where the statutes call for a distinct two-step process, where that first step would be to take the taxes levied, divided by the new assessments, and get a new millage rate so that it would be revenue neutral, and the taxes levied would be the same.
So the goal here is for fairness, and so it's possible that some taxpayers or property taxpayers might have to pay less tax, and some property taxpayers might have to pay more tax. Is that possible?
Yeah, typically in a reassessment, some people will see their taxes go up, some will see them go down, some will stay roughly the same, just depending where their assessments were before. And we're trying to get those assessments to represent 100% of that current market value.
That's great. And so in moving forward here, you had said that we try to do these reassessments every 8 years. But in this case, it's a little bit of an exception because we've waited, is it 12 years now?
Yeah, as I said, there was a delay back in 2011 because of the recession and the uncertainty of property values. Some were actually coming down in value, which was unprecedented. So there was a delay of 4 years to the market stabilized a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, so I can understand this a little bit better. If I owned a house in my neighborhood that was worth $200,000 or was assessed at $200,000 12 years ago and is now assessed at, say, $240,000, that doesn't necessarily mean that my property tax is going to increase.
Correct.
Correct?
Correct. It all depends on, as I said, the reduction of the millage rate. By law, the taxing bodies are required to reduce that by whatever the taxes levied were the year before against the new assessments. In theory, if the assessments went up, that tax rate is going to come down. So whatever that comes down proportionately will have a relationship to what your assessment went up.
Okay.
So, and I could give you a couple simple examples if you'd like. If a taxing body has a current millage rate of 3, say, there's $1 of tax per $1,000 of assessment. So a current millage rate of 3 would be 0.003 times your current assessment. So suppose after the new assessments are set, that taxing body, through looking at their taxes levied the year before and the new assessments, they arrive at a new millage rate so that their revenue is the same. So say it goes to 2.5 mils from the 3 mils, okay? Now suppose a person who owns a house that was assessed at $100,000, currently their mills are 3, would be about $300. With a new millage rate of 2.5, suppose their assessment goes up to 120, the 2.5 mils times the 120 would still be $300. So in that scenario, the amount of assessment that theirs went up was really proportionate to what the millage rate went down. So that makes that difference. You know.
I get that, makes it a little more clear for me, John. So basically what you're suggesting is, in my scenario where I had a house that was assessed at $200,000 and now is assessed at $240,000, if they would just reduce the millage so that I would be paying the same. If that's what the average of all the houses in Lancaster County went up. For instance, if all the houses in Lancaster County went up by, say, 30% or 20% in this case, right? Mm-hmm. If the house that I live in went up less than 20%, I would probably be not paying as much tax as I was before.
That would be correct.
But if my property went up, say, by 30%, then I might be paying a little bit more tax.
Right. It's tied to what the reduction was in the millage rate and what the increase would be in the assessment.
So again,
and that gives you a rough range.
This is to make property tax more fairer. It's not necessarily to generate more tax revenue.
Correct. As I said, you need to do it every so often so that you can level those assessments to where they should be. Because you always have a subset that maybe are higher than they should have been. You have some that are lower than they should have been. And you have some that are pretty close that maybe will not change a whole lot. So that's the big difference. Again, it'll be the taxes levied and how that municipality reduces that rate, and that will be tied to what your increase will be too. Right. So, and then of course by statute, if the taxing bodies feel that they needed to change for whatever reason the amount of taxes that they levied the year before, they do have a right to do that, as they would any other year. They have to take a separate vote to say, this is what we're going to increase the millage rate to. And by statute, they're capped at that 10%.
Okay, John, so what you're saying is reassessment does not permit the governing body to increase the amount of revenue they're generating unless they go through the normal formal process of going through a board of commissioners or a governing body and voting on an actual increase.
That's correct.
Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so yes. I think that's important for people to know, because I think a lot of people think, oh, reassessment, this is automatically going to mean, a tax increase. Well, it simply does not automatically
correct. That's a separate process
tax
now.
Increase.
So it's more transparent to see that process. Now the school districts, they're tied to the Homestead Taxpayer Relief Act, and that's by the state tells them every year what those rates could be. Past couple of years, that's been 2 to 3%.
Right.
Obviously, they can ask for exceptions for certain circumstances, and that's the same act that handles the homestead for the gambling money that offsets the school taxes.
Right.
That's what that's tied to.
Right.
So.
Yeah, and hopefully we can talk a little bit more about school property tax. It's a very, very big issue in Harrisburg and has been for quite some time. But it really doesn't have anything to do with the reassessment process. It's the reassessment process, again, is simply to make it fair what one person is paying against another person based on the value of their property. So this is all about trying to figure out what the value of the property is, so everybody is paying on the value of their property.
Correct. That is the intent, to be revenue neutral.
Right. Well, let's talk a little bit, John, about the process. I mean, there must be a process to reevaluate a property. And does this necessarily mean, John, that somebody's going to be out knocking on people's door and visiting them and walking through their house, or how does this process work?
Sure. No, we will not be visiting properties. The information we have on record is what we've had, and we follow up on building permits all the time to take note of any changes that are at the property. It's kind of different when you do a reassessment in-house. Back in the 90s, that was an independent firm that was hired. That's typically expensive for counties. That costs millions of dollars. If we were to do that now, even $40 a parcel, we have 190,000 parcels. That would be $7.6 million.
Right.
So we use the information we have. Hopefully the building permits get that information updated. We try to look at, as far as visiting properties, some of the things that typically make a difference, whether it's our everyday work or reassessment, would be the size of the home, you know, if you're talking about a house, the quality of construction and the workmanship, because you can have, you know, just a two-story box with 4 walls, or you can have a home that has high ceilings, you know, many roof lines, and a lot of different materials. So that all goes into quality and condition. Mm-hmm. For condition, we typically run with the conditions we've had on those properties. If it's gotten better, we usually have a permit that we can follow up on to see what that is. If it's something that we had as poor condition and over the years it's really gotten worse, it may be something that we're not aware of, and folks should let us know about that, whether it's in an appeal or you know, an informal, which we can discuss down
Sure.
too. So.
Well, in the middle of the process, let's say if you had your house remodeled 6 or 7 years ago, and would that have had affected your property value then? I mean, would someone have come out and reevaluated your house then, or
if it was normal cosmetic work, typically it didn't as much. Mm-hmm. But if a place was gutted and they took out a building permit and we had the condition less than what it was, that may be something that would change.
So
that.
if it required a building permit, there might have been some reassessment at the time.
Correct.
If it didn't require a building permit, probably not.
Right, that's correct.
And if somebody's at home and they're thinking, well, you know, I certainly hope that they know, you know, how big my house is and what the size is. I mean, isn't there somewhere they can look to see what their parcel description is? Isn't there a website?
Yes, yeah, we have a website, www.co.lancaster spelled out .pa.us, and if you put /TA, it'll take you right to tax assessment.
Or
if
you can
forget
search
that,
it.
you can
just search
department.
it, right? And
yes.
probably if you Google Lancaster County, Pennsylvania tax assessment, you know, you could probably figure out how to get to that
Sure.
that website
Sure.
also.
And we do have a lot of information on our website as well. We have a 2018 reassessment information that explains a lot of little more detail about the reassessment. You know, what our timeline is, what to expect as well. If you like, I can cover the timeline again too, because that's an important aspect.
Yeah, I think that would be great, John. And I know, John, you're going to be doing a lot of promotion about this and to try to get the word out. I know you and I are going to do a couple of town hall meetings about it, because I think there is some misunderstanding out there in the community and some concern whenever there's talk about taxes or reassessment that you know, there's some fear that somehow or other someone's taxes are going to go up dramatically, and that's not necessarily always the case. So
sure. It's a personal issue when you talk taxes.
Why don't we take a short break here in this legislative report and come back in about a minute or so.
Sounds good, Steve.
Did you know that Act 16 of 1999 honors one of the greatest leaders in the Pennsylvania House of Representatives? The Matthew J. Ryan Legislative Office Building, once known as the Capitol Annex, is located next to the main Capitol building and honors the late Speaker of the House, Matthew J. Ryan. Those who visit this building will observe the magnificent architectural designs providing eloquence and grandeur to the building. Known as one of the greatest members in the history of the Pennsylvania State House, Matthew Ryan started his career in the legislature in 1963 and was elected Speaker in 1981. His charisma and knowledge will forever be reflected in the building now named after this great legislative leader. Now you know.
Did you know that Violet Oakley was the first female artist to receive a large commission for artwork done in a United States Capitol building? In 1902, Joseph Houston, designer and architect for the third Harrisburg Capitol building, commissioned Violet Oakley to paint murals for the governor's reception room. He believed that Oakley's contribution would add interest to the building and act as an encouragement of women of the state. Prior to beginning her work for the Capitol, Oakley set out to England to conduct research for her murals. Upon return, she decided to center her artwork on William Penn and the founding of Pennsylvania. Oakley made sure that Penn's ideals of justice and peace could be seen throughout her work. In 1906, she completed 13 murals titled The Founding of the State of Liberty Spiritual and was placed in sequential order around the governor's reception room. These murals were some of the first to be installed in the Capitol. When Edwin Austin Abbey, another artist for the Capitol, died in 1911, Oakley was offered another opportunity to create murals for the unfinished Senate and Supreme Court chambers. Her work on the Senate murals, including International Understanding, was completed by 1919. Oakley then completed the Supreme Court murals, including the Divine Law, by 1927. Oakley is said to be the principal artist for the Capitol, with a total of 43 murals on display. She remains one of the greatest muralists in the United States. Now you know.
Did you know the Avenue of Flags presentation at Indiantown Gap National Cemetery has over 500 casket flags? Among the flags displayed are Commonwealth, territorial, and military flags. The flags are tied to 20-foot poles spaced 40 feet apart on both sides of the main drive of the cemetery. It takes about 2 hours to set up and take down all of the flags. Volunteers are encouraged to help with this task and must be at least 13 years of age. All of the flags are donated to the Avenue of Flags by families of the deceased. Now you know.
Did you know that in the corridors in the first floor of the Capitol of Pennsylvania, there are nearly 400 individual mosaics? The idea for creating these intricate tiles was first suggested by Henry C. Mercer in 1902. A year later, he received the commission to prove 16,000 square feet of pavement tiles for the Great Rotunda and corridors of the new State Capitol building in Harrisburg. Mercer set about designing subjects for approximately 400 mosaics. He chose as his general theme the history of Pennsylvania, and he soon realized that his tiles could tell stories. Although the arrangement seems random, the mosaics are very thoughtfully placed in the floor. The tile sequence is roughly chronological, beginning at one end with the scenes depicting the Native Americans. The mosaics progress into the story of European habitation in the New World and encompass the Commonwealth's triumph through process and intervention. Now you know.
Welcome back to this program. I'm State Representative Steve Mentzar. The topic for today is real estate assessment, and my guest is John Mavrides, Director of Assessment for Lancaster County. Welcome back, John.
Thank you,
and
Steve.
I think we're going to talk on this segment a little bit about the procedure and the timeline for this reassessment.
Yes.
So could you kind of walk us through that?
Sure. Our timeline plan is this coming March, around March 1st, we plan to mail out what we call a preliminary notice. This will let all property owners know, unless something changes, this is what our number looks like for your property. It also lets you know that we will be at Park City Mall in Lancaster. They have a community room there. It's right up on the second floor from Kohl's, where you enter Kohl's, next to where the Arby's is. You don't need an appointment. They can come in and talk to a staff member, one of our appraisers, to discuss, make sure the information looks accurate on the property, and make sure that we don't have 4 bathrooms listed and they really only have 2. Try to make sure that we have the square footage fairly accurate and that the description of that property is accurate. It's not as much a value issue at that time, although they're welcome to discuss any questions that they may have for the appraiser. It's more or less to get the information correct. The final notice will be mailed June 1st. Our goal with the informals, as we call them at Park City, would be if there's information that we need to correct, the data for the property. Our goal was to have that corrected after the informals so that when the June 1st notice goes out, that value is reflected in any changes that we made based on the meeting we had with the property owners.
Okay, so
Yeah.
John, what you're saying is that if you can't make your way through the technology of trying to find out what the description of your home is on the computer or through technology, you can, next time you're out at Park City and doing some shopping between March
13th through the 31st.
31st,
My apologies.
you can stop in and talk to an actual live person and say, hey, I'm concerned about this. This is the description of my house.
Right.
Is this what you have? To kind of make sure that everything's okay.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have more questions about the process, you can ask them then.
Right. They
So
can
that-
just say, I'd like to review the information you have on my property.
That's
and-
fantastic. Yeah. So
Yeah.
again, Park City's a place to go if you can't make your way through the maze of technology.
Right. They can also call us, and also in your preliminary notice, we hope to have a phone number dedicated as a phone bank, and we'll have that number on there as well.
Great.
And then on June 1st, there'll be information on that notice as well, explaining if you're not happy with the assessment, what the procedure would be, and we can discuss that.
Yeah,
if you
John,
like it.
that's interesting. So let's assume that you got the assessment in the mail and you look at it and you think, there's just no way that this thing is way higher than I ever thought it was, and this can't be right. What do you do then?
Online, you can get an appeal form as long as we get that within the 40 days from the date that's on that final notice, which should be around June 1st, so 40 days from there. As long as we get that appeal form, then we will schedule an appeal for anybody who sends that in. If you have questions here, again, you're more than welcome to call our office, after the final notice, and we'll be glad to discuss that with you. If you don't have a computer and you'd like us to mail you an appeal form, we can do that as well.
Okay, and the appeal process, let's talk a little bit about that. Is it one person? Is it a group of people? Is it you? I mean, who would make the judgment as to whether you had this appeal and you thought the value was too high and you thought it should be another valuation? Who makes that call?
Well, that would be the property owner to decide whether they feel their property is overassessed.
But if they feel it's overassessed, they go in front of somebody.
Yes, we have a 3-member board.
Oh, a 3-member board,
That's
okay.
appointed by the commissioners. But for the actual reassessment, we also have what's called auxiliary boards that are also appointed for that limited role, so that they can hear those appeals.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, when someone comes in to appeal, all they have to do is bring information that supports their estimate of what the property is worth by sales comparison, similar properties to theirs. If they have an appraisal, that's great. They don't necessarily have to spend the money on an appraisal. If you have a unique property, you might want to consider getting an appraisal, because it may not be easy for them to find some comparable properties.
Okay.
Yeah, I pretty much tell people whatever information you can bring in to support your case, that your property is worth X as opposed to what we have on the property.
Okay, so you're appealing to a 3-member board, and you make your case to why you feel that the property might have been assessed a little higher.
Right, and a lot of people, some feel that they need to have someone do that on their behalf. They don't. That's really up to them what they want to do, but it's
Right.
very easy to do on your own. You don't have to pay someone to come in and do that for you. There is no fee to appeal during a reassessment year, because that's any
Okay.
assessment we change.
Sure.
We don't feel that's right to
Sure.
charge people to do it. And if they happen to miss that year, every year owners have a right to appeal their property every year.
Great.
Anything that's done will be effective for the next tax year. So in the reassessment for next year, 2017, when they come into appeal, we would hear those appeals anywhere from June, July, all the way through October, beginning of November. And then whatever decision is made, they get a notice in the mail, and then that new assessment that takes effect for January 1st, 2018, that any reduction will be effective for as it starts.
Okay, great. Well, I just want to clarify one more thing, John. I keep going over this, but the reassessment is to make the property tax collection amongst all property taxpayers more fairer,
That's correct.
And so a governing body that, let's say, has revenue from property taxes of $10 million, right now, when they go through the reassessment, they're not going to collect more than very close to $10 million. The only way they can collect more than $10 million is for the governing body to appeal to raise taxes through normal channels. Is that correct?
That's correct. It
And
would
I
be a
think
separate vote. Yes.
Right. I think that's a very important to note here, because I think a lot of people are worried that this is a way for a governing body to increase their taxes, when it's simply a way to make taxes more fair amongst property taxpayers. So, and property taxes is always a big issue. It's a big issue here at the state level. We are concerned about school property taxes, and particularly with the older Pennsylvanians who are struggling to pay their school property taxes, we are trying to find ways to reduce or eliminate school property taxes. In this past session, we had House Bill 1189 that would have replaced school property taxes, lowered school property taxes dramatically, and increased the personal income tax and the sales tax, but reduced the amount of property taxes that are paid. And there have been many different proposals, and I certainly am going to work hard this next session to try to reduce or somewhat eliminate property taxes with something that would be a little bit more fair, particularly for seniors. So, I really appreciate you taking the time, John, to come in and explain this to us. Assessment is going to raise red flags for a lot of constituents out there, and it's great to have this explanation. And again, there's going to be a place where people can go and ask questions at our local shopping mall, that you can go out and you can talk to a live person to talk about your specific situation.
That's correct.
So,
And we're always here to help. So
Right.
please, take advantage of that and call us or stop in.
well, I do appreciate the fact that you were willing to come in here and talk about this, and it's been a pleasure spending the last half hour with the audience here. And certainly, if you have any questions, feel free to call my office. My staff will be able to direct you to the right place. My office telephone number is 626-1776. And I also have a website, repmentzar.com. So again, we appreciate you taking the time to come in here, and I'll look forward to joining you next time on my legislative report.